Why do you think the role of the General Counsel and the need to be valued within the organisation is so important?
I think the first thing, Elsa, is that it's actually just really important. The role of the General Counsel, I think, is actually integral to the business. I think for a number of reasons. I think that from our perspective, we find that we add value commercially as well as legally, which I think is a really important thing to understand. And I think that if you can influence the business in such a way that you have the opportunity to direct it, to be an integral part of it, to add value and to demonstrate value, then you're on a winner. And I think that actually the role of General Counsel in some respects can be pretty simple, because we're not here to be churning legal work out at every single point in time. What we are here to do is to help drive the business forward. And we are, in most cases now, an integral part of the decision-making process of the business.
And could you give me a few examples of different situations where you are adding value?
Sure. I mean, I think from an IHG perspective, of course, where I'm privileged to work, it's almost certainly the case that we add value, or I add value personally as General Counsel in that decision-making body. I am a member of the Executive Committee, and as a result of that, I have the ability to understand everything that's going on within the business. I think also you tend to find that you are really, really well thought of within the business for your legal expertise, and people actually trust you by virtue of you having that expertise, as well as the wider commercial context. I also think it's extremely important to ensure that you've got a CEO who trusts you and a chairman, in my case, that trusts you, because trust is actually, in my view, essential in order to be able to advise the business appropriately and help out whenever is required. And that is both, as I say, in a legal context, a commercial context, or in fact in any other point in time. And I think now we're given the opportunity, and I am personally in my executive committee, to have decision-making, be part of the decision-making process.
So how can the General Counsel really understand the business needs and align the legal department with these?
I think that General Counsels have to embed themselves totally into the business. I use the term in my legal team, genuine business partnership. And that is that although we always refer to the business, we know that actually we're an integral part of it. So we need a significant understanding of what the business does. And I actually think that we're in best placed to advise the business because we're living it and breathing it every day. And I think that's a really important element for anybody to learn once they become an in-house lawyer, because you've actually got that business running through your veins. It's something that is so important to you that you almost lay your body on the line as a result of it. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. You haven't got a lot of different competing clients. They're all running for the same thing. We're all running for greater profitability or greater performance of the company that we work for. And on that basis, I think it's really, really important to understand all the nuts and bolts of that business in order to be able to advise it appropriately.
So does the General Counsel need to be on the board to achieve this?
Yeah, I'm again, I suppose, slightly fortunate because I'm not just a lawyer in the business. I obviously have to take on, or we do in our organisation, the role of Company Secretary as well as General Counsel, so effectively the advisor to the board and primarily the non-executive directors. But also I have been lucky enough to take on other areas of responsibility, and they are internal audit, risk management, and slightly randomly corporate responsibility. And with that portfolio, what I realised is that I needed something that everybody felt proud of. If I just called the corporate responsibility guys lawyers, they wouldn't be particularly happy. They're not lawyers, and nor do they wish to be lawyers. And much the same for the risk managers. They're proud of their profession, and so are the internal auditors. So what we did is to sit down and think about what bound us together, and we realised that that was trust and reputation. So we came up with business, reputation and responsibility because we thought that that was the best description of what we do. And actually where we've ended up with is a slogan, a mantra, a mission statement, which is to champion and protect the trusted reputation of IHG and its brands. And the reason that we've done that is because we think it's important for the business to understand what we do. A lot of businesses don't necessarily fundamentally understand what lawyers do, what internal auditors do, what risk managers do. They sometimes know about corporate responsibility. They certainly understand about hugging trees, which of course is not what corporate responsibility is all about, but it's certainly something that we are always, I think, famed for as corporate responsibility. It's really about sustainability and work in the community and all those other areas where we think it's extremely important to advocate the business on an entirely different level. So we've done it in order to really sell ourselves and get the business as a whole to understand what we do and how we operate.
And does this have any impact on the role of the GC itself?
It certainly does, and the reason it has an impact on the role of the General Counsel, or my role, is that effectively you could call me EVP of Business Reputation Responsibility, so I have a much wider remit. It also gives me the ability to have a much greater perspective on the business because I get a lot more input from a number of different areas. And you can see a different viewpoint from an internal auditor's perspective than you can from a legal perspective. I have been described by our Chief Executive Officer, a guy called Richard Solomons, as an individual who probably has a unique perspective on the business because of the fact that I am seeing it from all these different levels globally. And of course, I'm also sat in the boardroom and I'm sat in the executive committee, around the executive committee table. And then for my individuals within those roles, within legal, internal audit, risk management, corporate responsibility, I actually want them to think wider than just their legal responsibility. So I want them to be, if you like, really representing the business reputation and responsibility team. And as a result of that, and the best way of doing that is obviously to think wider than their remit, wider than their scope of, in a lawyer's case in my world, sitting down, writing those management agreements day in, day out, and really think about how they can add value as part of a business reputation responsibility team. And that actually gives them, again, greater relevance in the business as a whole. And people understand that so much more than just that limited view of, I just create management contracts or negotiate contracts on behalf of the business.
And do you think there are any external providers who can help general counsels to achieve these business skills?
I think not only general counsels can be assisted in gaining wider business skills, but also all the lawyers within any organisation. And we can do that on many levels. I think that first and foremost, as everybody would say, external service providers, external legal services providers, such as the private practice law firms, always have a lot to add. I am an advocate of using them. I try and use them as little as possible, not because I don't think that they're good, but as we all know, we all have a budget and we've got to try and stay within it. But they do add, I think, a tremendous amount in terms of insight. They give you a wider perspective of the industry with which you're in, and they also give you a lot of current views on how the law obviously is at the point in time that you're negotiating or you're in some form of a dispute or trying to resolve a dispute. And I think that from a more general perspective, and certainly with some of the skills that you need in a wider business context, I think actually external coaches are great. Lawyers are not very good as managers, in my view. It's something that doesn't come necessarily naturally to all. It does to some, and they tend to be the ones, I think, who probably do better in-house. But I think that it'd be a really great added value if they can understand other areas and other aspects of a role, particularly in-house, and that is through coaching or even through mentoring, both internally and externally, in order to give them some of those added skill sets which they don't have when they come out of private practice with a very specific legal skill set.